The Art of Imperfection. Embracing the beauty of mistakes. You might think perfection is the ultimate goal, but embracing imperfection is actually the gateway to your greatest strength, creativity, and growth. This idea runs counter to everything we've been taught, doesn't it? From childhood, we're conditioned to color inside the lines, get the right answers, and present our best selves at all times. But what if I told you that the moments when you stumble, when you make mistakes, when you show your raw, unpolished humanity, what if those are actually the moments when you're most alive, most real, and most capable of transformation? I'm not asking you to celebrate failure for its own sake or to lower your standards. Instead, I'm inviting you to discover something profound, that the pursuit of perfection often leads us away from the very things we're trying to achieve. When we're so focused on avoiding mistakes, we miss out on the joy of discovery. When we're terrified of looking foolish, we stop taking the risks that lead to growth. When we're obsessed with presenting a flawless image, we lose touch with our authentic selves. The art of imperfection isn't about being careless or giving up on excellence. It's about understanding that true growth happens in the spaces between our intentions and our outcomes, in the gap between who we think we should be and who we actually are. It's about learning to dance with uncertainty, to find beauty in the unfinished, and to see our mistakes not as evidence of our inadequacy, but as proof of our courage to try. Throughout this journey together, we'll explore how perfectionism, despite its promises, often becomes a prison. We'll discover how our mistakes can become our greatest teachers, and how vulnerability can be our strongest currency in building meaningful connections. We'll learn practical ways to reframe failure, build resilience, and ultimately celebrate the beautiful messiness of being human. This isn't just about changing how you think about mistakes. It's about changing how you think about life itself. So, let's begin this exploration together, with all our imperfections intact, ready to discover the extraordinary power that lies within our beautifully flawed humanity. Chapter 1. The Myth of Perfection. Picture this. You're scrolling through social media, and every image you see is perfectly curated. The lighting is just right, the smile is radiant, the life behind the screen appears effortless and enviable. You see friends posting about their promotions, their perfect relationships, their Instagram-worthy meals. Meanwhile, you're sitting in your pajamas, surrounded by the chaos of your real life, wondering where you went wrong. This is the world we live in now, a world that has turned perfection into a commodity, a brand, a standard we're all supposed to meet. But here's the truth that no one talks about. Perfection is a myth, and it's a dangerous one. The myth of perfection tells us that somewhere out there, there's a version of ourselves that never makes mistakes, never feels insecure, never struggles with doubt or fear. This perfect version of us has it all figured out. The perfect career, the perfect relationship, the perfect body, the perfect life. And the myth whispers that this is what we should be striving for, that anything less is settling, that showing our flaws is showing weakness. But let's pause for a moment and really think about this. When was the last time you felt genuinely connected to someone who seemed perfect? When was the last time you were inspired by someone who never struggled, never failed, never showed vulnerability? If you're like most people, the answer is probably never. Because perfection, real or performed, doesn't inspire us, it intimidates us. It doesn't draw us closer, it pushes us away. The cultural pressure to be perfect isn't new, but it has reached unprecedented heights in our digital age. Social media platforms are designed to showcase our highlight reels, not our behind-the-scenes struggles. We see everyone else's carefully edited moments and compare them to our unfiltered reality. We forget that behind every perfect post is a person who, just like us, deals with insecurity, makes mistakes, and faces challenges. This constant exposure to curated perfection creates what psychologists call compare and despair. We're always measuring ourselves against impossible standards, always falling short, always feeling like we're not enough. The irony is that in our pursuit of perfection, we often become paralyzed by the fear of imperfection. Consider how perfectionism shows up in our daily lives. Maybe you're the person who spends hours crafting the perfect email, rewriting it multiple times before hitting send. Maybe you're the one who won't post that photo because you noticed a tiny flaw, or who won't share your creative work because it's not quite ready, it's not quite good enough. Maybe you're the person who avoids trying new things because you're afraid of looking foolish, or who procrastinates on important projects because you're terrified they won't meet your own impossible standards. The hidden cost of perfectionism is enormous. It leads to chronic anxiety because we're always worried about making mistakes. It creates burnout because we're constantly pushing ourselves to maintain impossible standards. It fosters avoidance because sometimes it feels safer not to try than to risk failing. It breeds isolation because we're too afraid to show our real selves to others. But perhaps the greatest cost of perfectionism is that it robs us of the joy of being human. When we're so focused on getting everything right, we miss out on the spontaneous moments of connection, the unexpected discoveries that come from trial and error, the deep satisfaction that comes from growth and learning. Think about children for a moment. Watch a toddler learning to walk. They fall down constantly, get back up, fall down again, laugh, cry, and keep trying. They don't waste time being embarrassed about their imperfect attempts. They don't compare themselves to other toddlers who might be walking more gracefully. They're fully present in the process of learning, accepting each stumble as part of the journey. Somewhere along the way, we lose this natural resilience. We start to believe that making mistakes is shameful, that struggling is a sign of inadequacy, that anything less than perfect is not worth sharing. We forget that learning is messy, that growth requires failure, that the most beautiful things in life often come from our willingness to be imperfect. The truth is, perfection is not only impossible, it's undesirable. A perfect world would be a static world, a world without growth, without surprise, without the beautiful unpredictability that makes life worth living. Perfect people would be boring people, incapable of empathy because they've never struggled, incapable of growth because they've never failed, incapable of real connection because they've never been vulnerable. So what if we chose a different path? What if instead of pursuing perfection, we pursued authenticity? What if instead of trying to eliminate our flaws, we learned to embrace them as part of our unique human experience? What if we understood that our imperfections are not bugs in our system, but features that make us interesting, relatable, and real? This doesn't mean we should stop trying to improve, or that we should be satisfied with mediocrity. It means we should redefine what success looks like. Instead of measuring success by how close we come to perfection, we could measure it by how willing we are to be authentic, how much we're growing, how deeply we're connecting with others, and how much joy we're finding in the process. The myth of perfection has held us captive for too long. It's time to break free and discover what lies on the other side. A world where our imperfections are not obstacles to overcome, but gifts to embrace, where our mistakes are not failures to hide, but opportunities to learn and grow, where our vulnerability is not weakness to suppress, but strength to celebrate. Chapter 2. The Power of Mistakes. Let me tell you about a mistake that changed the world. In 1968, a scientist named Spencer Silver was trying to create a super strong adhesive for the aerospace industry. Instead, he created something that seemed utterly useless, a weak adhesive that could be easily removed and didn't leave residue. For years, this failed experiment sat on a shelf, seemingly worthless. But then a colleague, Art Fry, had a problem. He sang in his church choir and was frustrated because his bookmarks kept falling out of his hymnal. Remembering Silver's weak adhesive, he wondered if it might be the perfect solution for repositionable bookmarks. That failed experiment became Post-it notes, one of the most successful office products in history. This story illustrates something profound about mistakes. They're not the opposite of success. They're often the pathway to it. But our culture has taught us to see mistakes as evidence of our inadequacy, as shameful secrets to hide, as proof that we're not good enough. What if we've got it all wrong? The power of mistakes lies not in the mistake itself, but in what we do with it. Every mistake is a piece of information, a data point that tells us something valuable about ourselves, our approach, or our environment. When we embrace our mistakes instead of hiding from them, we transform them from sources of shame into sources of wisdom. Consider the story of James Dyson, the inventor of the revolutionary vacuum cleaner. Before creating his final design, Dyson built 126 prototypes that didn't work. 5,126 failures. But Dyson didn't see these as failures. He saw them as 126 ways to learn what didn't work, each one bringing him closer to the solution. I didn't fail 126 times in making my vacuum cleaner, Dyson once said. I learned 126 ways not to make a vacuum cleaner. This reframing is everything. Instead of seeing his iterations as evidence of his inadequacy, he saw them as evidence of his persistence, his learning, his eventual success. This perspective shift, from seeing mistakes as failures to seeing them as learning opportunities, is at the heart of what psychologists call a growth mindset. People with a growth mindset understand that abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication and hard work. They see challenges as opportunities to improve, effort as the path to mastery, and mistakes as natural parts of the learning process. In contrast, people with a fixed mindset believe that abilities and intelligence are static traits. They see challenges as threats to their self-image, effort as a sign of inadequacy, and mistakes as evidence of their limitations. This mindset leads to the very perfectionism that holds us back from growth and discovery. The beautiful thing about mistakes is that they force us to be present. When everything is going according to plan, we can operate on autopilot, going through the motions without really paying attention. But when we make a mistake, we're suddenly awake, alert, forced to examine what happened and why. This heightened awareness is where real learning happens. Think about the last time you made a significant mistake. Yes, it might have been uncomfortable, embarrassing, or costly, but what did you learn from it? How did it change your approach? What insights did you gain about yourself or your situation? Chances are that mistake taught you something valuable that you couldn't have learned any other way. Mistakes also build resilience. Every time we stumble and get back up, we prove to ourselves that we can handle adversity. We develop what psychologists call anti-fragility, the ability not just to survive challenges, but to become stronger because of them. This resilience becomes a foundation for future risk-taking and growth. The fear of making mistakes often keeps us playing small, staying in our comfort zones, avoiding the very risks that could lead to breakthrough moments. But when we embrace mistakes as part of the process, we free ourselves to take bigger risks, to try new things, to push boundaries, and explore possibilities we never would have considered otherwise. Consider the world of innovation and entrepreneurship. The most successful entrepreneurs aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who fail fast, learn quickly, and iterate constantly. They understand that in a world of uncertainty and change, the ability to make mistakes and recover from them is more valuable than the ability to avoid mistakes altogether. This principle applies far beyond business. In relationships, our willingness to be vulnerable, to admit when we're wrong, to apologize and learn from our mistakes is what creates deep intimacy and trust. In creative endeavors, our willingness to create imperfect work, to experiment and play, is what leads to breakthrough moments and authentic expression. The power of mistakes also lies in their ability to humanize us. When we share our mistakes and what we've learned from them, we give others permission to be imperfect too. We create space for authentic connection, for real conversations about the challenges we all face. Our mistakes become bridges that connect us to others, rather than walls that separate us. But embracing mistakes doesn't mean being careless or reckless. It means being thoughtful about the risks we take, learning from our experiences, and using our mistakes as fuel for growth rather than reasons for shame. It means understanding that the goal isn't to eliminate mistakes, it's to get better at making them productively and recovering from them gracefully. The Japanese have a beautiful concept called Wabi-Sabi, which finds beauty in imperfection and impermanence. There's also the art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the repaired piece more beautiful than the original. These concepts remind us that our breaks, our mistakes, our imperfections don't diminish our value. They can actually enhance it, creating something more interesting, more valuable, more beautiful than what came before. So what would change if you started to see your mistakes differently? What if you began to collect them not as evidence of your inadequacy, but as badges of your courage to try? What if you started to share them not as shameful secrets, but as valuable lessons? What if you understood that your willingness to make mistakes is not a weakness, but one of your greatest strengths? The power of mistakes is waiting for you to claim it. Every stumble is a chance to learn. Every failure is a chance to grow. Every imperfect attempt is a chance to become more resilient, more authentic, more fully human. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes. You will. The question is whether you'll let them teach you, strengthen you, and ultimately transform you. Chapter 3. Reframing failure. The word failure carries so much weight, doesn't it? Just hearing it can trigger a cascade of emotions: shame, disappointment, fear. We've been conditioned to see failure as the opposite of success, as something to avoid at all costs, as a reflection of our worth as human beings. But what if our entire relationship with failure is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? Let's start by examining what failure actually is. At its core, failure is simply the gap between our expectations and our results. It's the space between what we hoped would happen and what actually happened. When we frame it this way, failure becomes less about our inadequacy and more about the natural unpredictability of life. The problem isn't that we experience failure, it's that we've been taught to take it personally, to see it as evidence of our unworthiness rather than as information about our approach, our timing, or our circumstances. We've learned to internalize failure, to make it mean something about who we are rather than simply something that happened. Consider the story of Oprah Winfrey, who was fired from her first television job for being too emotionally invested in her stories. Her boss told her she was unfit for television news. Today, she's one of the most successful media personalities in history. Was she a failure when she was fired? Or was she simply in the wrong environment, with the wrong approach, at the wrong time? The difference between people who are crushed by failure and those who use it as a stepping stone is often how they frame the experience. Instead of asking, "Why did I fail?" they ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of concluding, "I'm not good enough," they wonder, "How can I approach this differently next time?" This reframing isn't about positive thinking or denial. It's about accuracy. When we label ourselves as failures based on our outcomes, we're making a categorical error. We're confusing an event with an identity, a temporary setback with a permanent condition. We're taking a piece of data and turning it into a story about our worth. Let me share a practical framework for reframing failure that has helped countless people transform their relationship with setbacks. It's called the 3 R's: reflect, reframe, and respond. The first R is reflect. When something doesn't go as planned, instead of immediately jumping to self-criticism or blame, take a step back and examine what happened objectively. What were the circumstances? What factors were within your control and what factors weren't? What did you do well, even if the outcome wasn't what you hoped for? What would you do differently if you had to do it again? This reflection isn't about making excuses or avoiding responsibility. It's about understanding the complete picture so you can learn from the experience. Sometimes you'll discover that you could have prepared better or made different choices. Sometimes you'll realize that external factors played a larger role than you initially thought. Sometimes you'll find that you actually did everything right, but the timing just wasn't there yet. The second R is reframe. This is where you consciously choose a new narrative about what happened. Instead of, "I failed," you might say, "I learned something valuable." Instead of, "I'm not good enough," you might say, "I'm still developing this skill." Instead of, "This proves I can't do it," you might say, "This shows me what I need to work on." The key to effective reframing is to be honest but compassionate. You're not trying to sugarcoat the experience or pretend it didn't hurt. You're simply choosing a perspective that empowers you to move forward rather than one that keeps you stuck. The third R is respond. Based on your reflection and reframing, what's your next step? Maybe it's acquiring new skills, seeking feedback, adjusting your approach, or simply trying again with a different strategy. Maybe it's taking a break to recharge, seeking support from others, or pivoting to a new direction entirely. The response phase is crucial because it transforms failure from a dead end into a detour. It moves you from victim to agent, from powerless to empowered. It proves to yourself that setbacks are temporary and that you have the ability to bounce back. Let's look at how this might work in practice. Imagine you've been rejected for a job you really wanted. The old narrative might be, "I'm not qualified enough. I'll never get a job like this. I should just settle for something less challenging." Using the 3 Rs, you might reflect and discover that while you had most of the qualifications, you struggled with the interview questions about leadership experience. You might reframe this as, "This showed me an area where I need to grow. I have the technical skills, but I need to develop my leadership experience and get better at articulating it." Your response might be to seek out leadership opportunities in your current role, practice interview skills, or even reach out to the interviewer for feedback. This approach doesn't eliminate the disappointment of not getting the job, but it transforms that disappointment into fuel for growth rather than fuel for self-doubt. Another powerful reframing technique is to consider failure as data rather than verdict. Scientists don't consider their experiments failures when they don't get the results they expected. They consider them valuable data points that inform their next hypothesis. Each failed experiment brings them closer to understanding the truth. What if you approached your setbacks the same way? What if each disappointment was simply data that helped you understand yourself better, refine your approach, or discover new possibilities? What if failure wasn't the opposite of success, but an integral part of it? The reframing process also involves examining the stories we tell ourselves about what failure means. Many of us carry narratives from childhood about the importance of being perfect, about love being conditional on performance, about mistakes being shameful. These stories run deep, but they're not immutable truths. They're learned patterns that can be unlearned. Sometimes the most powerful reframe is the simplest one. I am not my outcomes. Your worth as a human being isn't determined by your successes or failures. You are valuable not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are. This fundamental shift in perspective can be liberating, freeing you to take risks, try new things, and bounce back from setbacks without your entire sense of self being on the line. Remember, reframing failure isn't about pretending it doesn't hurt or that you don't care about outcomes. It's about developing a more accurate and empowering relationship with setbacks. It's about understanding that failure is not a permanent state, but a temporary experience, not a reflection of your worth, but a source of valuable information. The goal isn't to eliminate failure from your life. That's impossible and undesirable. The goal is to become someone who can face failure with courage, learn from it with wisdom, and use it as a stepping stone to greater resilience and eventual success. When you master the art of reframing failure, you discover that your setbacks are not roadblocks but redirections, not endings but beginnings, not proof of your limitations but evidence of your humanity. Chapter 4. Vulnerability and Authenticity. There's something magical that happens when someone shares their real story with you, not the polished, edited version they present to the world, but the raw, unfiltered truth of their experience. Maybe they tell you about the time they completely bombed a presentation, or how they cried in a bathroom stall after a difficult conversation, or how they sometimes feel like they're just pretending to be an adult. In that moment of vulnerability, something shifts. The distance between you closes. You feel less alone. You remember that you're both human. This is the paradox of vulnerability. We think that showing our flaws will push people away, but it actually draws them closer. We believe that admitting our mistakes will make us look weak, but it actually makes us appear more authentic and trustworthy. We fear that being imperfect will cost us connection, but it's often the very thing that creates it. In our image-obsessed culture, we've forgotten this fundamental truth about human connection. We've been taught to lead with our strengths, to put our best foot forward, to never let them see us sweat. We craft carefully curated versions of ourselves for social media, for networking events, for first dates. We become performance artists of our own lives, always on, always managing our image, always hiding the parts of ourselves that feel too messy or complicated to share. But here's what we discover when we dare to be vulnerable. People don't connect with our perfection. They connect with our humanity. They don't relate to our successes as much as they relate to our struggles. They don't trust us because we never make mistakes. They trust us because we're honest about the mistakes we do make. Vulnerability isn't about oversharing or having no boundaries. It's not about dumping all your problems on everyone you meet or using your struggles as an excuse for poor behavior. True vulnerability is about being selectively authentic, choosing the right people, the right moments, and the right context to share your real self. The word vulnerability comes from the Latin vulnerare, meaning to wound. This etymology reveals something important. Vulnerability involves risk. When we're vulnerable, we're opening ourselves up to the possibility of being hurt, rejected, or misunderstood. But we're also opening ourselves up to the possibility of being seen, accepted, and deeply connected. Think about the relationships in your life that feel most meaningful. Chances are, they're the ones where you've been vulnerable, where you've shared your fears and dreams, where you've admitted your mistakes and shown your imperfections. These relationships feel different because they're built on a foundation of truth rather than performance. The courage to be vulnerable starts with self-acceptance. You can't share your authentic self with others if you haven't first made peace with who you are. This doesn't mean you have to love every aspect of yourself. It means you have to accept that you're a work in progress, that you're allowed to have flaws, that your worth isn't contingent on being perfect. One of the biggest obstacles to vulnerability is the fear of judgment. We imagine that if people knew the real us, with all our insecurities, mistakes, and imperfections, they would reject us. But this fear is often based on a false assumption that everyone else has it all figured out and that we're the only ones struggling. The truth is, everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. Everyone has insecurities, everyone makes mistakes, everyone has moments of doubt and fear. When you share your struggles, you're not revealing your uniquely flawed nature. You're revealing your shared humanity. Social media has complicated our relationship with authenticity. We're constantly comparing our behind-the-scenes struggles with everyone else's highlight reels. We see perfectly curated feeds and assume that's what real life looks like. But remember, social media is a performance platform, not a documentary. The people who seem to have perfect lives are simply better at editing their stories for public consumption. The pressure to maintain a perfect online image can be exhausting. We craft the perfect caption, choose the perfect filter, wait for the perfect moment to post. We measure our worth by likes and comments, constantly seeking validation from strangers. But what if we chose a different path? What if we use social media not to project perfection, but to share our authentic experiences? This doesn't mean you should post every detail of your personal life or turn your feed into a therapy session. It means being honest about your experiences, sharing both the struggles and the joys, showing the process and not just the outcome. It means being the person who posts about the presentation that didn't go well, the recipe that was a disaster, the day when everything felt overwhelming. When you start showing up authentically online, something beautiful happens. People start responding with their own authenticity. They share their own struggles, their own imperfections, their own real experiences. You create permission for others to drop their masks too, and suddenly the internet becomes a little more human. But vulnerability isn't just about what we share with others. It's also about how we handle it when others are vulnerable with us. When someone trusts you with their real story, their fears, their mistakes, how do you respond? Do you meet their vulnerability with judgment, advice, or attempts to fix them? Or do you meet it with presence, acceptance, and gratitude for their trust? Learning to hold space for others' vulnerability is a skill that deepens all our relationships. It means listening without immediately trying to solve or judge. It means saying, "Thank you for sharing that with me," instead of, "You should have done this instead." It means understanding that sometimes people don't need your advice, they just need to be heard and accepted. The workplace presents particular challenges for vulnerability and authenticity. We're often taught to leave our personal lives at the door, to maintain professional boundaries, to never show weakness. But research consistently shows that leaders who are willing to be vulnerable, who admit their mistakes, ask for help, and show genuine emotion are more effective and more trusted than those who maintain a facade of perfection. This doesn't mean you should treat your office like a therapy session or share inappropriate personal details. It means being honest about your learning curve, admitting when you don't know something, and showing genuine interest in others as whole human beings rather than just professional functions. The art of vulnerability also involves timing and discernment. Not every person deserves access to your inner world, and not every moment is appropriate for deep sharing. Vulnerability is a gift that should be given thoughtfully to people who have earned your trust and in contexts where it can be received well. But when the timing is right, when you're with people who matter, when you have the opportunity to share your real self, take it. Tell the story about the time you completely misread a situation. Share the fear that keeps you awake at night. Admit the mistake that taught you something important. Own your story with all its imperfections and complexities. Remember, authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about showing up as yourself, with all your flaws and strengths, fears and dreams, mistakes and triumphs. It's about understanding that your imperfections aren't obstacles to connection, they're invitations to it. When you embrace vulnerability and authenticity, you give others permission to do the same. You create a ripple effect of realness that makes the world a little more honest, a little more compassionate, a little more connected. And in a world that often feels increasingly artificial and performative, that's a gift we all desperately need. Chapter 5. Building Resilience Through Imperfection. Resilience isn't about being unbreakable, it's about being bendable. It's not about avoiding life's storms, but learning to dance in the rain. And perhaps most importantly, it's not about being perfect under pressure, but about being gracefully imperfect when things don't go as planned. We often think of resilient people as those who never struggle, who always bounce back quickly, who seem to have some magical ability to remain unaffected by life's challenges. But this understanding misses the mark entirely. True resilience is developed not in the absence of difficulty, but in the presence of it. It's built not by avoiding imperfection, but by embracing it as an inevitable part of the human experience. Think about a tree in a storm. The trees that survive aren't the rigid ones that try to stand perfectly straight. They're the ones that bend with the wind, that sway and flex and sometimes lose branches, but keep their roots firmly planted. They're imperfect in their response to the storm, but they're alive because of that imperfection. This is the paradox of resilience. Our ability to withstand life's challenges comes not from our strength, but from our flexibility. Not from our perfection, but from our willingness to be imperfect. Not from our control, but from our acceptance of uncertainty. Let's start with control, because this is where many of us get stuck. We believe that if we can just plan enough, prepare enough, perfect enough, we can control our outcomes. We think that if we do everything right, we can avoid failure, disappointment, and pain. But life has a way of humbling our illusions of control, reminding us that we're not the directors of our own stories as much as we'd like to believe. The attempt to control everything is not only impossible, it's counterproductive. When we're so focused on controlling outcomes, we become rigid, anxious, and fragile. We put all our eggs in one basket, expecting our perfect plan to work perfectly. When it doesn't, we're devastated because we haven't developed the flexibility to adapt. Resilient people understand something profound. The only thing we can truly control is our response to what happens to us. We can't control whether we get the job, but we can control how we handle rejection. We can't control whether our relationship works out, but we can control how we show up in it. We can't control whether we face challenges, but we can control how we meet them. This shift from trying to control outcomes to focusing on our response is liberating. It means that our well-being isn't dependent on things going according to plan. It means that we can find stability even in uncertainty, strength even in imperfection, success even in failure. Building resilience through imperfection starts with changing our relationship with uncertainty. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a threat to be eliminated, we can learn to see it as a natural part of life to be navigated. Instead of trying to predict and control every variable, we can develop the confidence that we can handle whatever comes our way. This doesn't mean being passive or fatalistic. It means being strategic about where we put our energy. Instead of spending all our time trying to perfect our plans, we spend some of that energy developing our adaptive capacity. Instead of focusing only on preventing problems, we also focus on building our ability to solve problems when they arise. One of the most powerful ways to build resilience is through what psychologists call stress inoculation. Just as vaccines expose us to small amounts of illness to build our immune system, stress inoculation involves deliberately exposing ourselves to manageable challenges to build our psychological resilience. This might mean taking on projects that stretch your abilities, having difficult conversations you've been avoiding, or trying new things that make you uncomfortable. It's not about seeking out unnecessary stress, but about not avoiding all stress. It's about understanding that discomfort is often the price of growth, and that our capacity to handle discomfort grows with practice. The Japanese concept of anti-fragility is relevant here. Unlike things that are fragile and break under stress, or things that are resilient and withstand stress, anti-fragile things actually get stronger from stress. They improve under pressure, grow from chaos, benefit from volatility. As humans, we have the capacity to be anti-fragile. Our muscles grow stronger when we stress them through exercise. Our immune systems get more robust when exposed to challenges. Our emotional resilience develops when we face and overcome difficulties. Our capacity for joy deepens when we've also experienced sorrow. This anti-fragility comes not from avoiding imperfection, but from embracing it as a source of strength. Every mistake we make and learn from increases our wisdom. Every challenge we face and overcome increases our confidence. Every time we fail and get back up, we prove to ourselves that we're more resilient than we thought. Building emotional resilience also involves developing what psychologists call emotional agility, the ability to navigate your emotions with curiosity, compassion, and courage. This means not trying to eliminate difficult emotions, but learning to be with them without being controlled by them. When we're emotionally agile, we don't see difficult emotions as evidence that something is wrong with us. We see them as information about our experience, as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. We can feel disappointed without being defined by disappointment. We can experience fear without being paralyzed by it. We can acknowledge sadness without being consumed by it. This emotional agility comes from practice, from learning to notice our emotions without immediately judging them, from developing the capacity to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it, from understanding that all emotions are temporary and that our ability to feel them deeply is part of what makes us human. Another crucial component of resilience is developing what researchers call meaning-making, the ability to find purpose and significance in our experiences, even the difficult ones. This isn't about pretending that bad things are good or that everything happens for a reason. It's about asking ourselves, how can I grow from this? What can I learn? How can this experience contribute to my understanding of myself and the world? When we can find meaning in our struggles, they become less likely to defeat us. When we can see our challenges as opportunities for growth, rather than just obstacles to overcome, we become more resilient. When we can understand our imperfections as part of our humanity, rather than flaws to be ashamed of, we become more whole. The practice of self-compassion is also essential for building resilience. This means treating ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a good friend who was struggling. It means acknowledging our pain without minimizing it, recognizing our common humanity in our struggles, and being mindful of our emotions without being swept away by them. Self-compassion doesn't make us weak or complacent. Research shows it actually makes us more resilient, more motivated, and more likely to learn from our mistakes. When we're kind to ourselves in difficult moments, we're more likely to bounce back quickly and more likely to take the risks that lead to growth. Building resilience through imperfection also means developing a practice of small, imperfect actions. Instead of waiting until we feel ready, until we have all the answers, until we can do something perfectly, we learn to act with incomplete information, to start before we feel ready, to take imperfect action toward our goals. This practice of imperfect action builds confidence and momentum. Each time we act, despite our uncertainty, we prove to ourselves that we can handle whatever comes next. We learn that we don't need to have everything figured out to move forward, that progress is more important than perfection, that done is often better than perfect. The beauty of building resilience through imperfection is that it's available to everyone. You don't need special talents, resources, or circumstances. You just need the willingness to engage with life as it is, not as you wish it were. You need the courage to be imperfect, the wisdom to see challenges as opportunities, and the compassion to treat yourself gently through the process. Remember, resilience isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's not something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's something you develop day by day, choice by choice, imperfect action by imperfect action. And paradoxically, the more comfortable you become with imperfection, the more resilient you become in the face of life's inevitable uncertainties. Chapter 6. The Beauty of Being Human. As we near the end of our journey together, I want to share something with you that might surprise you. The most beautiful people I've ever known weren't the ones who had it all figured out. They weren't the ones who never struggled, never failed, never doubted themselves. The most beautiful people I've known were the ones who had been broken and put themselves back together, who had failed and learned to try again, who had faced their imperfections and found ways to love themselves anyway. There's something profound about the human experience that can only be appreciated when we stop trying to transcend it and start embracing it. We are not meant to be perfect. We are not meant to have all the answers. We are not meant to live without struggle, without growth, without the messy, complicated, beautiful process of becoming who we're meant to be. Think about the Japanese art of kintsugi again, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. The resulting piece isn't just restored, it's transformed. The breaks become part of the beauty, highlighted rather than hidden. The imperfection becomes the art. This is a perfect metaphor for human existence. We are all broken and mended, cracked and repaired, imperfect and beautiful precisely because of our imperfections. Your scars tell stories. Your mistakes have taught you lessons. Your struggles have built your character. Your failures have redirected you toward better paths. Your imperfections have made you relatable, approachable, human. These aren't flaws to be ashamed of, they're evidence of a life fully lived. But our culture doesn't celebrate this truth. We're constantly bombarded with messages that tell us we should be more, do more, have more. We're sold the lie that happiness comes from achieving some perfect state of being, the perfect body, the perfect relationship, the perfect career, the perfect life. We're told that our current imperfect selves are just rough drafts, that the real version of us is still under construction. What if this is backwards? What if the imperfect you, the one reading this right now, with all your doubts and fears and unfinished business, what if this is already the real you? What if you don't need to wait until you're perfect to be worthy of love, success, and happiness? What if you're already enough, exactly as you are? This doesn't mean you should stop growing or striving. It means you should stop believing that your worth is contingent on your achievements. It means you should stop waiting for permission to be proud of who you are. It means you should stop apologizing for taking up space in the world. The beauty of being human lies in our contradictions. We are strong and vulnerable, confident and insecure, wise and foolish, all at the same time. We contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman said. We are works in progress, and that's exactly what makes us interesting. Think about the people you admire most. I bet they're not the ones who seem to have it all together. They're the ones who are authentic about their struggles, who admit their mistakes, who show their vulnerability. They're the ones who make you feel less alone in your own imperfection, who give you permission to be human too. This is the gift you give to the world when you embrace your imperfections. You make it safer for others to be imperfect too. You create space for authenticity in a world that often demands performance. You remind people that it's okay to struggle, to fail, to be uncertain. You show them that beauty comes not from having it all figured out, but from being willing to figure it out as you go. The beauty of being human also lies in our capacity for growth. We are not fixed entities trapped by our past mistakes or current limitations. We are dynamic beings, capable of learning, changing, evolving. Every day offers new opportunities to become more of who we're meant to be. Every mistake is a chance to course correct. Every failure is a chance to begin again. This capacity for growth is what makes our imperfections beautiful rather than tragic. They're not permanent stains on our character. They're temporary states that can be transformed through awareness, effort, and compassion. Our flaws are not our destiny. They're our starting point. But growth doesn't mean perfection. It means progress. It means becoming more authentic, more compassionate, more resilient. It means learning to love ourselves and others more deeply. It means finding meaning in our struggles and joy in our journey. It means embracing the messy, complicated, beautiful process of being human. As we conclude this exploration together, I want you to consider what would change if you fully embraced the beauty of being human. What would be different if you stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be real? What would shift if you saw your imperfections as features rather than bugs? What would open up if you understood that your struggles are not signs of your inadequacy, but evidence of your humanity? Maybe you would take more risks, knowing that failure is not the opposite of success, but part of it. Maybe you would be more vulnerable in your relationships, knowing that your imperfections are what make you lovable. Maybe you would be more compassionate with yourself, knowing that self-criticism is not the path to growth. Maybe you would be more present in your life, knowing that this imperfect moment is the only one you have. The art of imperfection isn't about settling for less or giving up on your dreams. It's about understanding that the path to those dreams is paved with mistakes, failures, and imperfect attempts. It's about recognizing that your worth is not determined by your achievements, but by your willingness to keep trying, keep growing, keep showing up as yourself. Life is not a problem to be solved or a puzzle to be completed. It's an experience to be lived in all its messy, complicated, beautiful imperfection. You are not a work in progress, you are a work of art, complete and beautiful exactly as you are, while simultaneously becoming more of who you're meant to be. Your imperfections are not obstacles to your happiness. They are the very things that make you human, relatable, and real. They are the cracks that let the light in, the breaks that become beautiful when filled with gold, the stories that connect you to others who have struggled and grown and learned to love themselves anyway. So as you go forward from here, remember this: you are not broken, you are not too much or not enough. You are not behind or ahead or anywhere other than exactly where you're supposed to be. You are perfectly imperfect, beautifully human, and worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are. The art of imperfection is not something you master, It's something you practice. It's not a destination you reach. It's a way of traveling. It's not a problem you solve. It's a mystery you live. And in that living, in that practicing, in that traveling, you discover something profound, that your imperfections are not your limitations, but your possibilities. They are not your weaknesses, but your strengths. They are not your shame, but your glory. Welcome to the beautiful, messy, imperfect art of being human. Welcome to your life exactly as it is. Welcome to yourself exactly as you are. You are enough. You have always been enough. And your willingness to embrace your imperfections is what makes you not just enough, but extraordinary. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Your step doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. And that, my friend, is more than enough.